She slapped him. Not a stage slap. Not the kind people practiced in acting class with their palm angled away and their head turning before contact. A real slap, open hand, full force. The sound of it cracking through the Williams estate dining room like something had broken inside the walls. Every person at that table went completely still. The juice glass Beverly had knocked sideways with her elbow was still rolling. Nobody watched it go. It fell off the edge of the table and shattered on the floor, and still nobody moved because the thing that had just happened was bigger than broken glass. Mariam's hand was still in the air. Beverly's cheek was turning red in real time. It was Mariam who had done it, and the reason was simple and ugly and had been building for 3 days. Beverly had looked across the breakfast table, smiled the smile she used specifically when she wanted to wound without witnesses, and said quietly enough that only Mariam could hear, "Father always said you performed love better than you felt it. I think he was right." That was what did it. Not the competition, not the prince, not the weeks of needling and one-upmanship. That one sentence, delivered in Beverly's softest voice, carrying the weight of a dead man's name, that was what sent Mariam's hand across the table before her mind had finished forming the decision. Annabelle had her fork halfway to her mouth and had not moved since the sound. Jessica had pushed her chair back slightly, not standing, not fleeing, just creating enough distance to breathe because she had learned years ago where to position herself when this particular storm broke. Clara Williams rose from her chair. She did not shout. She did not rush. She rose slowly, with the deliberateness of a woman who had moved past fury into something colder and more permanent, and the silence she brought with her was more frightening than any noise. "What?" she said, barely above a whisper. "Did you just do in my house?" Mariam lowered her hand. Her chest was heaving, but she did not touch her own face. Did not show Beverly that the sentence had landed before the slap. She used father's name too. "I don't care what she said," Clara cut in. "I care what you did." Beverly sat very still, one hand pressed against her cheek, eyes bright with something that was equal parts pain and satisfaction. She had gotten the reaction she wanted. She had also gotten more than she planned for. "Both of you," Clara said. "You will sit, you will finish breakfast, and you will not say one more word to each other at this table." The room obeyed. Annabelle resumed eating with the quiet focus of someone who had survived many versions of this morning. Jessica looked at her plate. The silence settled like sediment. And standing in the kitchen doorway, tray in both hands, having arrived at what was clearly the worst possible moment of his first 20 minutes in this house, was Ji-ho. He stood completely still. His face gave absolutely nothing. He looked at the shattered glass, the red mark developing on Beverly's cheek, Clara Williams at the head of the table radiating a controlled fury that filled the entire room, and he thought, with the specific calm of a man who had made a decision and was now living inside its consequences, "This is going to be more complicated than I planned." Clara looked up and noticed him in the doorway. "Bring the rest of breakfast," she said. "Yes, ma'am," he said, and went back into the kitchen. Temi was against the far counter, with her eyes wide and her hands pressed flat on the surface, like she needed something solid. "That happens sometimes," she whispered. Ji-ho set the tray down carefully. "Between those two specifically?" "Those two the most," Temi said. "The others manage. Miss Annabelle stays out of it. Miss Jessica," she paused, picking the word. "Miss Jessica watches. She doesn't say much, but there is nothing in this house she misses." Ji-ho picked up the next tray. "Good to know," he said, and walked back in. This time, as he moved around the table, he paid a different kind of attention. Mariam was eating with the precise, controlled movements of a woman, refusing to let anyone see she was affected. Beverly had her phone out, which could have been genuine disengagement or a performance of it. Annabelle had resumed eating with the focused efficiency of someone who had burned calories before breakfast and needed to replace them immediately. And Jessica had a book on the table beside her plate, face down to keep her page, and she was not reading it. She was looking at her food and thinking about something that had nothing to do with the food. When Ji-ho set a glass near her, she looked up, and the look she gave him was direct and completely uncalculated. Not warm to impress, not cool to establish distance, just a person acknowledging another person. "Thank you," she said. He said, "You're welcome," and moved away before anything showed on his face that wasn't supposed to be there. Day 1. If you are watching this for the first time, stop what you are doing and subscribe right now, because this story is about to take you somewhere. Most romance dramas do not have the nerve to go. A crown prince walks into a house full of women who have no idea who he is. Only one of them is going to treat him like a human being before she knows what he is worth. Hit subscribe, hit like, and drop a comment right now telling us which sister do you think he is going to choose. Because it is not who you think. We are reading every single comment. 3 days before Ji-ho arrived at the Williams estate, he had been sitting in his palace room doing what he always did when bad news was approaching, which was nothing, just sitting, phone down, waiting. Because in the Kang household, bad news moved faster if you went looking for it, so the trained response was stillness. Soo-yeon knocked with her specific 3-beat rhythm. "Father?" she said simply, opening the door. Ji-ho already had his jacket on the arm of the chair. Downstairs, King Kang Soo-hyun sat in the main reception room with Queen Park Yeon-hee beside him. Ji-ho walked in, bowed once, sat before being gestured to. Soo-yeon settled quietly behind him. His father looked at him the way he always did when the conversation was going to cost something, not unkindly, but without softness either. Like a man who had made peace with delivering difficult truths because they were still truths. "Min-jae has selected a wedding date," Soo-hyun said. Ji-ho kept his face still. "He is 26 years old," his father continued. "Your younger brother, 26, and he has a fiancé and a date and a path forward. You are 30, and you have—" He paused, not cruelly, just letting the sentence land. "Nothing in that direction." "I understand the position," Ji-ho said. "Then stop behaving as if you don't," his father said, and his voice was even and firm and held no room for debate. The throne does not pause for personal comfort. The people are watching this family. I am not as young as I was 8 years ago, and the whole country knows it. What they need to see is a crown prince who is rooted, who is ready. A man without a family looks like a man without conviction. And a man without conviction, he held Ji-ho's gaze, cannot lead people who need to believe in something. Ji-ho said nothing. He had heard versions of this since he was 22. Each version landed differently depending on what had happened in his life between hearings. This one landed somewhere still raw. Yeon-hee spoke then, her voice warmer but her intention identical. "I have a family in mind. The Williams family. Chief Raymond's daughters. 4 of them. Unmarried. Well-raised. From a family with real values and real history." She folded her hands in her lap. "Raymond and your father were brothers in everything except blood. He died 2 years ago, and your father felt it like a personal loss. There is already warmth and trust between our families. It would not be starting from nothing." She looked at her son carefully. "I think when you meet them, you will feel that." Ji-ho looked at his mother, then at his father, then at his own hands briefly. "I have one condition," he said. His parents waited. "I want to go there without the crown," he said. "I want to go as someone ordinary, a palace worker, sent as a goodwill gesture. I stay in the house, I observe them as they actually are, not as they perform when they know they are being evaluated." He kept his voice level. "I want to see how they treat people they believe are beneath them, before I decide anything." Yeon-hee's face changed immediately. "Ji-ho, my son does not walk into another family's house pretending to be a worker," she said. "He is the crown prince of this country. He does not." "He does," Soo-hyun said. Yeon-hee turned to her husband. "Let him finish," Soo-hyun said. Ji-ho continued. "One woman gave me 2 perfect years, father. Every conversation, every reaction, every moment of warmth or vulnerability, all of it constructed, performed, built specifically for my benefit." His voice did not rise. It went quieter, which was worse. "I believed all of it. Every single thing. I was going to marry her. And she was telling people about our relationship the entire time. Private things. To the wrong people. For her own reasons. He looked at his father directly. I will not walk into a room as myself, watch women perform their best versions for my approval, and call that knowing them. I have done that already. I know exactly where it ends. Silence filled the room. King Soo-hyun studied his son for a long time. Long enough that Soo-yeon, sitting behind Ji-ho, held her breath without realizing it. Then he nodded. Once. Slowly. Go, he said. But you remember who you are every single day you are in that house, even when no one else knows it. Yeon-hee looked at her son with a worry she had the grace not to turn into an argument. If anyone in that house disrespects you, she said quietly, you come home. I can handle it, mother. Ji-ho. She held his eyes. You come home. Yes, mother. That night on the palace terrace, Soo-yeon stood beside him, with her arms crossed and her face doing several things at once. Walk me through it, she said. I explained it to mother and father. Explain it to me without the formal framing. Ji-ho leaned on the railing and looked at Haewon below them, the city lit and breathing. Ha-eun was consistent, he said. Perfectly, completely consistent for 2 years. No bad days. No contradictions. No moments where she said the wrong thing, or reacted badly, or had to fix something small. He turned to look at his sister. You told me once that real people are inconsistent, that they have rough days and wrong reactions and private embarrassments. Ha-eun had none of that, because Ha-eun was not being real. She was being strategic. He looked back at the city. So, I want to go into that house as nobody, and I want to watch what happens when these women interact with nobody. Because that is when you see the real thing. Soo-yeon was quiet for a moment. And is this about seeing them clearly? Or is it about giving yourself an exit if none of them are what you need, so you can tell mother and father you tried? Ji-ho did not answer immediately. Both might be true at the same time, he said finally. Soo-yeon looked at him for a long moment. Then she bumped his shoulder with hers gently. Okay, she said. Cover name? Lee Ye-won. Call me every day. I will. And if anyone in that house raises their voice at you. Soo-yeon. I mean it. I know you do. Go to sleep. She went inside. He stayed on the terrace and looked at Haewon and thought about a family he had never met and a choice he had to get right this time. Because he was not sure there was a version of himself that could survive getting it wrong again. Queen Yeon-hee made the call to Clara Williams the following morning. She was gracious and warm, and said all the right things about goodwill between families and the honor of their connection. Clara's responses were warm and slightly breathless in the way of a woman who understood exactly what the gesture meant, even if it was not being stated directly. What Ji-ho did not know, what no one had thought to tell him, was that the Williams family was more complicated than it appeared from the outside. Chief Raymond Williams had loved broadly and imperfectly. He had built a fortune and a reputation and a household that held, with remarkable dignity, the results of 3 different relationships across 2 decades. Clara was his final partner, the woman he had been with the longest, the one who had buried him. But the daughters he left behind did not all share her blood. Mariam Walters was Raymond's eldest, born from his first relationship before Clara. Beverly Williams was Clara's own daughter, the only one who carried both parents' names. Jessica Okafor was Raymond's daughter from a Nigerian woman he had loved quietly and for a long time before that relationship ended without bitterness. And Annabelle Jackson carried the surname of her Jamaican mother, Raymond's third relationship, the most passionate and the most complicated. Clara had not chosen any of this, but she had chosen to stay. And in staying she had chosen all of them, had raised them together under one roof, had buried Raymond with all 4 of his daughters beside her, had held this household together with the specific determination of a woman who refused to let what life handed her become an excuse for what she did next. The daughters called her mother, every one of them, not always warmly, not always without friction, but the word was real. And Chief Raymond Williams, whatever his complications, had given all four of his daughters his love, his name in spirit, if not always in surname, and a home that existed because Clara Williams had been strong enough to build it. This was the house Ji-ho walked into. He arrived on a Tuesday morning. Plain car, plain clothes, one bag. The security man at the gate straightened the moment Ji-ho gave the palace name. He was shown inside by Dara, a compact woman in her 50s, with sharp eyes and a walk that meant business, who guided him to the staff quarters, listed the house rules in clipped, efficient sentences, and then stood in the doorway and looked at him for a moment too long. "You carry yourself," she said slowly, "like someone who has never been told what to do in his life." Ji-ho kept his expression neutral. "I'm still finding my footing." She looked at him one more second, then she turned and left. Breakfast prep, 6:30. Ji-ho sat on the edge of the narrow staff bed and looked at the plain walls and made himself a promise. He was going to do this fully or not at all. No half measures, no special treatment requested, no moments where the mask slipped because something was uncomfortable. He had chosen this. He was going to live it. He set his bag down and prepared for 6:30. By day 3, Ji-ho had a working map of each woman, and none of it matched the surface. Mariam called him to her room on the second afternoon under the pretense of wardrobe organization. The wardrobe was perfectly organized. Within 4 minutes, she had redirected entirely. "You've been at the palace a while?" she asked, watching him in her vanity mirror as he moved the boxes she pointed at. "A few years, ma'am." "You've seen the household, the upper household, from a distance. What is he like?" She was looking at her own reflection but listening with her full attention. "People say he's closed off, doesn't let people in." "I wouldn't know, ma'am. I stay at my level." Mariam turned from the mirror slightly. "You must have formed an impression." Ji-ho set a box down. "My impression is that people call powerful men cold, when what they mean is that those men don't perform warmth for the benefit of observers. That's not the same as cold." Mariam stared at him. Ji-ho bowed his head slightly. "Is there anything else you need moved, ma'am?" She turned back to the mirror. "No," she said quietly. "That's all." He left. Behind him, Mariam looked at her own reflection with the expression of a woman who had just touched a thread she intended to pull on later. Beverly found him washing one of the cars on a warm afternoon and sat on the front steps nearby with no explanation for why she was there. "Quick question," she said. "Of course. Is he actually good-looking, or is it just what palace photographers do with lighting and angles?" Ji-ho kept his cloth moving on the car door. "I think professional photographers are generous to most of their subjects." "That is not an answer. It's the most honest one I can give." Beverly stared at him. Then she laughed, sudden and real, nothing manufactured about it, the laugh of someone genuinely caught off guard with no time to manage the reaction. It changed her entirely, stripped the performance right off her face. Underneath all the competition and careful construction was a woman with real humor and a fast mind, and Ji-ho filed that away with the seriousness it deserved. "You're funny," she said, like this slightly annoyed her. "Thank you." "Don't call me ma'am. It sounds wrong." Ji-ho glanced at her. "How would you prefer? Just talk to me like a person." She leaned back on her elbows. "My sister thinks she's already won this whole thing. Mariam. She wakes up every morning completely certain it's going to be her. And you disagree. I think whoever he is, if he has any sense at all, he's going to be looking for someone who isn't performing for him." She paused. "Or maybe I'm just saying what I would want if I were in his position." Ji-ho turned to look at her. "Is it also what you want for yourself? Someone who isn't performing?" Beverly looked at him then, and something shifted in her expression, not quite surprise, more like being caught in a thought she hadn't meant to share out loud. "That's a big question for someone washing a car," she said. Ji-ho turned back to the door. "My apologies." She stood up from the step and brushed off her clothes. "Finish the car," she said, and walked back inside. But at the door she paused for just a half second, and Ji-ho could see from her posture that something had settled into her that she had not arrived with. He turned back to the car. Beverly Williams was not what she appeared to be from the inside of a family argument. He was going to need to remember that. Annabelle found him before sunrise, on day 4. He was in the kitchen when she appeared in the doorway, in training shorts and a worn hoodie, basketball in one hand, completely unself-conscious about the hour. "Can you rebound?" she said. He looked at her. "Yes." "Come on then." They played on the side court for 40 minutes in the early morning quiet. Annabelle was fast and instinctive and completely transformed on the court. The careful carelessness she wore inside the house was gone entirely, and in its place was someone focused and alive and entirely real. This was the only place Ji-ho had seen her be fully herself. She missed a long shot and retrieved the rebound with a sound of genuine frustration. "Don't tell my mother I was out here," she said. "Tell her what?" "That I was doing this, instead of—" She dribbled without looking at him. "Preparing." "Preparing for what?" "To be selected," she said it flatly, without drama. "That is what this whole arrangement is, isn't it? We are 4 options in a selection. My mother has already written the ending in her head and she just needs one of us to cooperate." Ji-ho caught the ball when she passed it. "And you won't." "My father came to every single game I played from the time I was 8 years old," Annabelle said. Her voice shifted. Something quieter came into it. "He sat in those stands and cheered louder than any parent there, and he never once suggested I should be doing something more fitting. He never used that word fitting." She looked at Ji-ho steadily. "He's been gone 2 years. I still reach for my phone to call him when something goes right." She took the ball back. "My mother is not wrong that I need to build a life. She is wrong about what that life has to look like. And until I figure out how to say that in a way she can survive hearing, I am going to be exactly what she cannot stand." Ji-ho looked at her. He thought about grief with nowhere appropriate to go, about carrying a future other people designed for you, when the one person who truly saw you was no longer there. He threw the ball back without comment. She caught it, and the morning continued around them, quiet and real, and nobody performing anything for anyone. And then there was Jessica. Day 4, late afternoon. She was in the garden on the stone bench, with her book open and a cup of tea that had gone completely cold on the armrest beside her. Temi had mentioned it consistently enough that Ji-ho had taken it as useful information. He brought a fresh cup without being asked. Jessica looked up at the cup, then at him. A flicker of something that was half gratitude and half private embarrassment crossed her face. "Dara told you," she said. She mentioned it. "Of course she did." Jessica wrapped both hands around the warm cup. "Thank you." Ji-ho nodded. He was going to walk back in. He had told himself to keep interactions brief and professional. "What are you reading?" he asked instead. She turned the cover toward him. A Korean novel in English translation, interconnected stories about people in the same building who kept almost finding each other and never quite managing it. Ji-ho went still for exactly 1 second. "You read Korean literature?" he said, and heard the thing in his own voice that he hadn't managed to keep out. Jessica looked at him with a fraction more attention than before. "My father loved it," she said. He said Korean writers understood loneliness differently from other traditions. Less about isolation, more about proximity without connection. People right next to each other who can't quite reach. She looked at the cover. "I've been reading through everything he marked up in his copies. It's slower than I expected, not because the books are hard, because his handwriting is in the margins and I keep stopping to read what he thought." Ji-ho sat down on the far end of the bench. He had not decided to do that. He was simply already there. Jessica glanced at him but said nothing about it. "Do you read?" she asked. "Yes," he said. The surprise moved across her face and was gone in under 2 seconds. She caught herself, registered that she had shown it, reset quietly without making anything of it. But Ji-ho had seen the assumption arrive and the embarrassment follow and the correction happen all in the space of one breath, and the honesty of that small, unmanaged sequence was more real than anything he had encountered in 2 years of watching Ha-eun perform perfection. "What kind of things?" she asked, moving past it cleanly. History. Anything that resists a clean conclusion. Books that present a problem and live inside it instead of solving it. She looked at him properly now. Not assessing, not strategic. Just present. Why those? Because clean conclusions are almost always dishonest, he said. Real things are complicated. They don't resolve neatly. They continue in a different form. Jessica held his gaze for a moment. That is either genuinely wise, she said, or it is the thing people say when they are not ready to resolve something, and need it to sound like a philosophy. Something loosened in Ji-ho's chest. The specific surprise of being read accurately by someone who had no reason to try. Possibly both, he said. The edges of a smile crossed her face. Possibly both, she agreed. They talked for 14 minutes. He tracked it, not to end the conversation but to know how far from his original plan he had already traveled. 14 minutes with a woman who made no attempt to impress, who challenged him without performing challenge, who asked follow-up questions because she was genuinely curious, and not because curiosity was the strategically correct behavior in this situation. When he finally stood to leave, she said, "Good afternoon, Jae-won," in a tone that was simply honest. Not warm to establish connection, not cool to maintain distance, just honest. He walked back inside, and stood in the kitchen for 2 full minutes, doing nothing useful. Dara appeared from nowhere the way she always did. She looked at him once. "Don't," she said. He looked at her. "Don't do the thing where you call it professional interest and move on," she said. She poured herself water and left the kitchen without another word. Ji-ho stood at the counter and looked at the window above the sink. He was already in trouble and he had been in this house for 4 days. We are at the halfway point, and if you are not subscribed yet, then honestly, you are the villain of this story, and you know it. Hit subscribe right now, drop a like, and tell us in the comments, is Jae-won falling for Jessica, or is this just guilt because he is lying to her? Because the comments are going to be divided on this, and we want your honest opinion. The second half of this story is where everything breaks open, so stay right here. Dara found him in the kitchen the following morning before the house was awake. She poured her tea and stood against the counter and looked at him with the expression she had been building toward since day one. "I have one thing to say, and I will say it once," she said. Ji-ho turned from the window. "I do not know your name," she said. "I do not know which house you come from, or what you are doing in this one. But I have worked in households my entire life, and I know the difference between a man who serves and a man who is enduring." She held her mug steady. "Whatever your reason for being here, I hope it is worth what it is costing, because there are people in this house who have already lost one person they trusted entirely. If another person they trusted turns out to be something other than what they said," she stopped. "Let the sentence finish itself in the air between them. Find what you are looking for quickly, and then be honest about it, before the damage is bigger than the reason." She took her tea and left. Ji-ho stood in the kitchen alone and let the weight of it settle into him. She knew, not the name, not the title, but the lie, and she was right about the damage. He could already feel it, the gap between what he was presenting and what was actually happening growing wider every day, and at some point, that gap was going to become a wound that neither of them could close from opposite sides. He had to tell Jessica himself, before anything else did it for him. Tomorrow morning. He would tell her, tomorrow morning. He did not get tomorrow morning. The collision between Mariam and Beverly happened that same afternoon. Ji-ho was in the study helping Beverly reorganize the upper shelves she had asked him that morning, first request of the day, and he had confirmed. Mariam appeared in the doorway at 2:30 with the expression of a woman who had arrived to find something she considered hers already occupied. "Jae-won, I need you. My bag's for the car. I'll be with you shortly. I'm nearly finished here." Mariam's gaze moved to Beverly on the ladder. "I arranged this with him first." Beverly looked down. "You arranged it yesterday and didn't follow through. I asked him this morning, first thing. What I arranged stands regardless of when you asked. That is genuinely not how time works." It is how this house works. This is not your house. I am the eldest of Raymond Williams' daughters, and my being the eldest has never once meant what you think it means. Don't start with me, Beverly. You came in here starting with me. Ji-ho set down the stack of files in his hands and turned to face both of them. I can finish the shelves in 10 minutes and carry your bags immediately after, he said evenly. That is the most. You don't get to mediate us, Mariam said. Her voice had sharpened. Not at Beverly, at him. You are not in a position to tell us what the most efficient option is. You do what you're asked. So which of us is it? The study went completely silent. Ji-ho looked at Mariam. He looked at Beverly. He thought about who he actually was, and what he would say if this conversation were happening honestly, and decided this was not yet that moment. The bags, he said calmly. As soon as I finish here, I gave my word to Beverly first. Mariam stared at him with an expression that was deciding something about him specifically. Beverly made a sound that was not quite a laugh, but was close enough. That sound was what turned the argument into something older and uglier than the present moment could contain. They were shouting in under a minute not performed outrage, but the specific fury that comes from a wound that predates the argument by decades. Two women who shared a father but not a mother, who had grown up in the same house holding completely different griefs, and who had transferred every unresolved piece of that onto each other for so long that neither of them could locate the original injury anymore. Ji-ho stepped back and let it run. There was nothing useful he could do inside it. He was the trigger, not the cause. Clara appeared at the study door. She took the room in with one sweep her daughters, the files on the floor, Ji-ho standing at the side wall. My room, she said to both daughters. Now. They went. The room emptied. The silence came back. Ji-ho picked up the files from the floor. From the hallway came a soft sound. He turned. Jessica was in the doorway. She had not been part of it. She had been passing, had heard the escalation, had stopped. She looked at the room, then at him, and what was on her face was not embarrassment for her family. It was the specific exhaustion of someone who has watched a pattern repeat so many times that the shock burned out years ago, and only the weight of it remains. Are you all right? She asked. He looked at her. Yes. She nodded once, turned to leave. Jessica. She stopped. He had not planned to say her name. It came because she had asked him a real question in the middle of a room full of unreal things, and it had mattered in a way he had not anticipated. Thank you, he said, for asking. She turned and looked at him for a moment, direct, clear, unhurried. Then she nodded once, small and genuine, and left. Ji-ho stood in the empty study with the files in his hands. He put them down, picked them back up, put them down again. He was running out of time, and he knew it. That night, he lay in the staff quarters and stared at the ceiling, and had the honest conversation with himself he had been avoiding. He was not here anymore to observe and evaluate. He had evaluated. He had known since day 2, and had been arguing with himself about it since day 2 because what he had found was inconvenient and complicated and was going to require him to dismantle the entire structure he had built before he could act on it with any integrity. He picked up his phone and called Soo-yeon. She answered on the second ring. Are you okay? Tell me something honestly, he said. About Ha-eun. Was there anything, any single real moment that I missed that should have told me? Soo-yeon was quiet for a moment. No, she said. She was completely consistent. That was actually what bothered me from the beginning, even when I couldn't name it. Real people aren't consistent. They react badly sometimes. They say the wrong thing. They get embarrassed. They have days where they can't manage themselves. A pause. She never did any of that. She was always exactly the right temperature, always the right response at the right moment. I told myself it was just her personality. A breath. It wasn't. Ji-ho stared at the ceiling. Why are you asking this now? Soo-yeon said slowly. Because I met someone who is the opposite of everything you just described. Silence. Which one? Soo-yeon asked softly. The one who reads Korean literature because her father's notes are in the margins, he said. She lets her tea go cold every single day because she forgets to be practical when she is thinking. She assumed something about me and was quietly embarrassed by it before I had even noticed. She watched her sisters fight and did not perform sympathy or distance. She just stood in a doorway and was present because that is who she is. He paused. Tonight, she walked into a room I was in after something difficult happened and asked if I was all right. No audience, no benefit to her. She just asked because I was a person and she noticed. Soo-yeon said nothing for a moment. She is not Ha-eun, Ji-ho said. She is not one single thing like Ha-eun. Ji-ho, Soo-yeon said quietly. I know. You need to tell her. Tomorrow morning, before anything else breaks. She is going to be angry. She has every right. And her mother, I'll manage it. He looked at the ceiling of the small room. I just need to tell her myself. She deserves to hear it from me before she hears it from anywhere else. This is the most like yourself you have sounded in 2 years, Soo-yeon said. He didn't answer that. Come home after, she said. However it goes. Come home and do the rest of this correctly, with your name on it. I will. He looked at the plain ceiling of the staff quarters. I'll call you tomorrow. He did not sleep. He lay in the dark and rehearsed what he would say, and how much space he would need to give her inside the moment, and how he would hold his ground if she told him to leave, because she would be right to tell him to leave, and he would have to accept it. He was ready before 5 in the morning. Mariam was in the kitchen at 6:15. She was already fully dressed, composed with the specific composure of a woman who had also not slept and had arrived at a decision during the night. I know, she said simply. Ji-ho looked at her. Not your name, she said, but what you are not. She stood with her arms folded, voice completely controlled. You stay calm. When challenged the way people with real authority stay calm, not because you're trained to absorb it, but because none of it actually threatens you. The woman who came to the gate 3 days ago was family, not a colleague, and you have not once in 6 days looked like a man who needs this position. She met his eyes directly. Who are you? Ji-ho held her gaze. Give me 1 hour, he said. I need to tell Jessica myself, before you say anything to your mother. The kitchen was completely silent. Something moved across Miriam's face, a woman recalculating the entire architecture of something she had been constructing, and then it was sealed, smooth, gone. You chose her, she said, not a question. Ji-ho said nothing. Mariam looked at the wall behind him for a moment, then back. 1 hour, she said quietly. After that, I cannot hold this. She walked out without looking back. Ji-ho moved immediately. Jessica was in the garden earlier than usual. Her book was closed on her lap closed, meaning she was thinking, not reading. She heard his footsteps and looked up, and whatever was on his face made her set the book aside entirely. What is it? She said. Not a question, a preparation. Ji-ho stopped in front of her. Every sentence he had constructed and rehearsed through the night left him completely. My name is not Lee Jae-won, he said. The garden went still. My name is Kang Ji-ho. Jessica stared at him. He watched it move through her confusion first, then the name arriving with its full weight, then the recognition. Then the terrible quiet before understanding settles into something you have to decide what to do with. The prince, she said. Her voice was flat and very quiet. Yes. She stood up slowly. The book slid from her lap. She did not pick it up. She stood and looked at him, and her eyes were dry and clear and more difficult to face than tears would have been. You came here as a worker, she said. Yes. To watch us. Yes. To evaluate us without our knowledge. To see how we treated people we thought were beneath us. I needed to know who you actually were before you knew what I was worth, he said. I could not risk another situation where someone performed a version of themselves for 2 years, and I believed all of it. I could not do that again. Her jaw tightened slightly. So we were a test. You were at the beginning, he said. By day 2 it stopped being that. And what was it after day 2? Real, he said. Every conversation in this garden, everything I said to you about books, about trust, About whether I was brave enough to be honest about something. None of that was constructed. I was not performing Lee Jae-won by then. I was just... He stopped. Just what? She asked. Present, he said. Honestly present. For the first time in longer than I can explain. Jessica looked at him for a long moment. Something fractured very slightly at the edges of her expression. She sealed it immediately, but he had seen it. You should have told me, she said. I know. You sat in this garden and listened to me talk about trust. I know. You asked me how I decided to trust someone. I know what I did, he said quietly. I am not asking you to excuse it. I am asking you to know that what I felt in those conversations was the most honest thing I have felt in 2 years. The name was false. Everything else was real. She looked at him for a long time. The morning was completely still. Somewhere in the estate a door opened and closed. The ordinary sounds of the house waking up. Leave, she said. He nodded once. He turned. Ji-ho. He stopped. She was looking at the garden, not at him. Her voice was carefully, expensively controlled, and underneath it something was working very hard to stay that way. Did you find what you were looking for? She asked. He turned. He looked at her face in the early morning light, the closed book on the ground at her feet, the cold tea, the whole of her standing in the garden, being furious and real and not performing a single moment of either. And he said, Yes. She said nothing. He walked back inside. Mariam was at the foot of the stairs. She read his face in 1 second. It's done, he said. She looked at him steadily. Then she said, quietly, she will be angry for exactly as long as she needs to be, and then she will think, and then she will decide. She paused. When Jessica decides something, it does not move. So whatever you do next, do it right. Do it completely. Because if you come back to her halfway, she will close the door, and she will not reopen it. Ji-ho held her gaze. You knew it was her. I knew the morning you set juice in front of her without being asked, and she was the only one at that table who looked you in the eye to say thank you, Mariam said. I am not a fool. I just took longer to admit what I was seeing. She looked at the staircase. For what it is worth, you chose correctly. She went upstairs and did not look back. Ji-ho collected his bag from the staff quarters. He said goodbye to Dara, who looked at him with complete unsurprise. I hope you know what you're doing, she said. I'm still working that out. She is worth working it out for, Dara said simply. The ones who don't perform are always rarer than they should be. He walked through the Williams estate one final time. Through the main house, past the staff corridor, and through the entrance hall where the portrait of Chief Raymond Williams hung, the wide smile, the kind eyes, the face of a man who had loved his daughters loudly and imperfectly, and left them in a world that expected them to simply carry on. Ji-ho stopped in front of the portrait for a moment. I'll come back correctly, he said quietly. With my name, with everything honest. He walked out the front gate into the Havon morning. The car was waiting. He got in. He did not look back. He looked forward at the city, waking up around him. The Havon coast glittering ordinary Tuesday morning. The whole world going about its business, with no knowledge that something had shifted inside a house on the east side of the city that was going to change the direction of more than one person's life. He called Soo-yeon. She answered before the second ring. Well? She knows. How did she take it? She asked me to leave. Ji-ho. She also asked me if I found what I was looking for. A silence. And you said? The truth. Soo-yeon breathed out slowly. Come home, she said. Come home, and let mother and father know. And then go back there the right way, with your name on it, and the family behind you, and no more false ground to stand on. I know. She needs time. I know. Her mother is going to be a completely different problem. I know that too. And Mariam already knew. She gave me 1 hour. A silence. Then a soft sound from Soo-yeon that was somewhere between a sigh and something warmer. Come home, Ji-ho. He leaned back in the seat and looked out at Havon passing on both sides. He thought about 14 minutes in a garden that had become the most real 14 minutes he had spent with another person in 2 years. He thought about a woman who let her tea go cold and read her dead father's margin notes and caught herself making assumptions and felt privately embarrassed without ever turning that embarrassment into performance. He thought about Dara's words on the very first morning. "You carry yourself like someone who has never been told what to do." He thought about what it was going to cost him to walk back into that house with his real name and ask for something he had not yet earned the right to ask for. He thought about Mariam's warning. When she decides something, it does not move. Good, he thought. He did not want her to move toward him because she had been maneuvered into it, or because the circumstances made it convenient. He wanted to deserve her where she stood. That was going to require him to be something he had not yet managed to be for anyone since Ha-eun. Completely honest, with nothing hidden, with no secondary plan and no exit constructed in advance. Just himself, his real name, his real face, everything on the table. He was going to have to figure out how to do that. He was already thinking about how. The car moved through Havon. The city opened up around him, wide and breathing, and indifferent to his particular complications, the way cities always were. In the garden behind him, Jessica had not moved. The estate was waking up around her. Beverly's voice, from somewhere upstairs, her mother's footsteps moving through the kitchen, the distant rhythmic bounce of Annabelle's basketball on the side court. The whole ordinary weight of her life settling back into place around something that was not ordinary at all. She looked at the closed book on the ground where it had fallen. She looked at the cold tea. She looked at the empty space in front of the bench where he had been standing when he told her the truth. She thought about a man who said real things were complicated, who said clean answers were almost always lies, who had sat in this garden with a false name and said the most honest things anyone had said to her in years, and who had somehow made all of those things simultaneously true and unbearable and impossible to simply dismiss. She thought about whether it was possible to understand someone fully and be completely furious at them at the same time. She decided those were not opposing states. They were two real things living in the same body, which was uncomfortable and unresolved and had no clean conclusion, which was, she thought, with something that was not yet a smile but was in that direction, exactly what he had said real things were like. She stood up. She picked up the book. She picked up the cold tea. She stood in the garden for one more moment and looked at the gate where his car had been. She would be angry for exactly as long as she needed to be. And then she would think, and then she would decide. And whatever she decided would be real. Completely, entirely, uncomplicatedly real. Because that was the only way Jessica Okafor knew how to do anything. She went inside. That is the end of part 1. And before you go anywhere, if this story moved you at all, subscribe right now because part 2 is where everything explodes. Ji-ho comes back to that house with his real name and his real face, and the entire Williams household finds out the truth at the same time. Drop a comment right now telling us, does Ji-ho deserve a second chance after what he did, or did he use up every chance the moment he walked through that gate with a false name? There are genuinely 2 sides to this argument, and we want all of it. Like this video, share it with someone who loves a story that doesn't take the easy way out, and we will see you in part 2. The real fight has not even started yet.